It sounds so obvious you almost feel embarrassed for asking. The government needs money. People need money. The government has a machine that makes money. So why doesn't it just use the machine? This question has been asked by children, by voters, by presidents, and by economists who spent their entire careers trying to answer it without sounding condescending. And the strange thing is, the answer is not what most people expect. It is not that printing money is impossible. It is not that governments never do it. They do. They have. They are doing it right now in ways that most people never see. The real answer is about what money actually is, what happens to it when you make more of it, and why the machine that sounds like a solution is often the thing that makes the problem worse. You have probably heard the word inflation. You might even use it casually. But there is a version of inflation that economists study that goes far beyond rising grocery prices. It is called hyperinflation, and once you have seen what it does to a country, the question of why we don't just print more money answers itself in a way no textbook ever quite captures. In 1923, Germany was in crisis. The First World War had ended. The reparations bill handed to Germany by the Treaty of Versailles was so large it was almost incomprehensible. The German government needed to pay it. It did not have enough tax revenue. So it did the thing that seemed obvious. It printed. The Reichsbank created money at a pace that seems almost fictional in retrospect. By November of 1923, a single loaf of bread cost 200 billion marks. Workers were paid twice a day so they could spend their wages before the money lost half its value by lunchtime. People burned banknotes in their stoves because the paper was worth more as fuel than as currency. A wheelbarrow full of cash could not buy a newspaper. What happened? The same thing that always happens when a government prints money without a corresponding increase in the real goods and services that money can buy. The supply of money goes up, the supply of bread, coal, shoes, and meat does not. So prices rise to match. And if the printing continues, prices rise faster. And if the printing accelerates, you get Weimar Germany, you get Zimbabwe in 2008, where the central bank issued a $100 trillion note that could not buy a bus ticket. You get Venezuela in the 2000s, where the bolivar lost 99.9% of its value in less than a decade. This is the first answer to your question. You cannot simply print money and hand it out because money is not wealth. Money is a claim on wealth. It is a token that represents the real things that an economy produces: the food, the houses, the cars, the medical care, the labor. When you print more tokens without producing more things, each token buys less. The people holding money become poorer, even though the number on the paper has not changed. It is one of the cruelest tricks in economics. A government can appear to give you something while actually taking something away. But here's where it gets more complicated. Because the story of printing money is not simply a cautionary tale. It is also a story about how the global financial system actually works, and how far it has drifted from the simple version of economics taught in classrooms. In 2008, the United States Federal Reserve did something extraordinary. Faced with a financial crisis that threatened to collapse the entire banking system, it created money, not by printing physical bills, but by adding numbers to balance sheets, and used that money to buy financial assets from banks. This program was called quantitative easing, and over the following years it expanded to a scale that would have seemed surreal a generation earlier. By 2022, the Fed's balance sheet had grown to nearly $9 trillion. $9 trillion, created essentially from nothing. And yet inflation, for most of that period, remained relatively low. How? Why didn't the United States become Weimar Germany? The economist Milton Friedman, who spent much of his career arguing that inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon, would say that the reason is where the money goes. The money the Fed created in 2008 did not go directly into the hands of consumers. It went to banks. Banks held a significant portion of it as reserves rather than lending it out aggressively. The money entered the financial system but did not flow quickly into the broader economy in ways that would drive up everyday prices. It inflated asset prices, stocks, bonds, real estate, which primarily benefited people who already owned assets. But the bread and milk inflation that ordinary people feel was relatively contained for years. Then came 2020, the pandemic, and this time, governments did something different. They sent money directly to people. stimulus checks, enhanced unemployment benefits, business loans. This was the closest thing the modern world had seen to what economists call helicopter money, a term coined by Milton Friedman himself, imagining a helicopter flying over a city and dropping dollar bills into the streets. And what followed, by 2021 and 2022, was the highest inflation most Western countries had seen in 40 years. The lesson was not that stimulus caused inflation by itself. Economists are still debating the precise causes of that inflation. Supply chains, energy prices, corporate pricing power, and pandemic-era disruptions all played roles. But the episode illustrated something fundamental. When newly created money reaches consumers directly, and consumers spend it on goods and services, and the supply of those goods and services cannot expand fast enough to meet the demand, prices rise. The more money chasing the same amount of stuff, the higher the price of the stuff. This brings you to the second part of your question, not just why can't we print money, but why can't we print money and give it to everyone? What if we were just very careful about it? What if we only printed a little? What if we targeted it carefully toward people who would spend it on things that help the economy grow? This is actually a legitimate area of economic debate. The economist Stephanie Kelton, in her book The Deficit Myth, argues for a framework called modern monetary theory, which holds that a government that issues its own currency can never truly run out of money in the way a household or business can. The real constraint, she argues, is not the money supply. It is the productive capacity of the economy, the workers, the factories, the infrastructure. As long as there are unemployed workers and idle resources, a government can spend newly created money to put those resources to work without necessarily causing inflation. The risk only appears when you try to spend more than the economy can actually produce. Critics of modern monetary theory, including mainstream economists like Larry Summers and Olivier Blanchard, argue that Kelton and her colleagues underestimate how quickly economies can hit their productive limits, how hard it is for governments to precisely calibrate spending, and how fast inflation can accelerate once it gets started. The 2021 inflation episode became a flashpoint in this debate. Those who had warned against large stimulus programs pointed to rising prices as evidence of their concerns. Those who supported the programs pointed to the fact that employment recovered faster than after any previous recession in modern history. The argument is real. The stakes are real. And the honest answer is that economists do not fully agree. What they do agree on is the mechanism. Money, on its own, is not the answer to poverty, inequality, or economic stagnation. It is a medium of exchange. Its power depends entirely on what it can be traded for. A country's true wealth is its people, its institutions, its infrastructure, its technology, its land, its knowledge. Print money faster than those things grow, and you dilute what you have. Invest in those things wisely, whether funded by taxes, by borrowing, or in carefully measured amounts by money creation, and you build something that lasts. The machine exists, governments use it. The question has never been whether to turn it on. The question is always what happens next. Because money printed without a corresponding expansion of real value does not create wealth. It redistributes it, from savers to debtors, from workers to asset owners, from people on fixed incomes to people who own things, and from the future, where that inflation quietly taxes everything your money was supposed to buy. You asked why? The government doesn't just print money and give it to everyone. Now you know the answer. It can. It does. And when it does, someone always pays the price. The only question is who.